Thanksgiving smelled like pine cleaner and burnt coffee. The farmhouse floor groaned as I stepped inside. I carried a pumpkin pie, still warm. No one even looked my way. Mom's eyes cut through me, sharp as a knife. Her apron was dusted with flour, hands tight on the table edge. Dennis, my brother, leaned back, smirking like he owned the place. His wife whispered something, both of them laughing under their breath. I felt the heat rise in my chest. The air was heavy, thick with turkey and tension. Hannah, my niece, offered a small smile. She was the only one who didn't glare. We sat. Silverware clinked. Grace finished. Dennis bragged about his new SUV, acting like his money paid for it. I knew the truth. I'd been covering his loans for years. Then Mom's hand slammed the table. The plates rattled. Her coffee spilled across the lace runner, bitter scent filling the air. She stood, voice sharp. "Lane, you've embarrassed us long enough. You live off scraps. We carry this family. Get out." My fingers dug into the wooden chair. No one said a word. The room felt colder than the November wind outside. My breath shook, but I stayed quiet. Every eye stayed on me, waiting. I rose slowly, grabbed my coat. Hannah's eyes welled up, but she stayed silent. The floor creaked as I walked to the porch. Outside, the air bit my skin. The wind carried the distant sound of a church bell. I looked back once. Lantern light glowed through frosted windows. Inside, they kept eating. My hands stopped trembling. I pulled the door shut behind me. For the first time, I felt free. The gravel crunched under my boots as I reached my old truck. Wind stung my cheeks, sharp as broken glass. I tossed the pie onto the passenger seat, its warmth already fading in the cold. The porch light flickered behind me, but no one followed. Not Mom. Not Dennis. Not even Hannah. Just that cold lantern glow through the frosted glass. I slid into the driver's seat. The cabin smelled like old leather and pine air freshener. My hand still trembled on the wheel. Radio static buzzed before an old country song faded in. Every mile down that dark country road felt heavy. Memories hit like flashes. Mom saying I was dead weight when I left the Air Force. Dennis laughing, calling me the charity case. Every holiday, the same whispers, same stares. I gripped the wheel tighter. I thought about the trust fund. The quiet payments that kept their lights on, their fridge full. They never asked where it came from. They never cared. My breath fogged up the windshield. I cracked the window, letting the freezing air wake me. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to turn back, slam the truth in their faces. But I didn't. Not yet. The farmhouse faded in my mirror, just another glowing dot. Freedom felt raw. Rage burned just as hot. Would you tell them everything, or let them fall silent on their own? Comment 1 or 2. The road stretched empty under the November moon. Headlights carved tunnels through the dark trees. Every mile, another memory surfaced. On that cold drive, the past felt closer than the farmhouse behind me. Air Force Base, Colorado, 2005. The wind cut through the hangar doors. I remember standing guard, snow stinging my face. The runway lights flickered like lonely stars. Nights like that, I told myself it was worth it. I was serving, building something bigger. And yet, I always heard Dennis's voice in my head. "Elaine's wasting her life, y'all. No one's gonna marry a soldier." Back then, my bunk smelled like metal and cheap detergent. The coffee was always burnt. Letters from home were rare. When one came, it was usually Mom asking for money. Not, "How are you, dear?" Just, "Dennis's bills are piling. Can you help?" I worked double shifts to cover them. Skipped holidays, sent home every bonus. Bought Dennis a used car when his engine blew. Covered Mom's leaking roof when the storms hit. Never once did they say thank you. The wipers squeaked as rain started. Each swipe felt like another year gone. 15 years of service, 12 countries, 5 bases. Not once did they visit. They never saw the long nights, the drills, the silent tears. But I kept giving. Because I thought one day they'd see me. Not as dead weight. Not as the charity case. Just their daughter, their sister, doing her best. The truck's heater hummed, faint and warm. Outside, a deer darted across the road. Its shadow vanished into the trees. I gripped the wheel tighter. Even now, after all I've given, they see me as nothing. And maybe that's why tonight feels different. Snow drifted across the tarmac the night I decided to quit. The cold bit deep, sharper than any blade. My knees ached from years of drills. Every breath felt like dragging glass through my chest. The loudspeaker echoed, calling night shift. Engines roared in the distance. Jets ready for takeoff. I stared at the runway, lights glowing in the dark. 15 years, and it felt like I'd been invisible the whole time. Back in my quarters, the phone buzzed. Dennis again. His voice was frantic, desperate. "Elaine, the bank's coming. If you don't wire the money, I'm done." Mom's voice broke through next, quiet but sharp. "Dear, you know we can't lose the farmhouse. Please, we're counting on you." I sat on the metal bunk, staring at my duffel. My reflection in the steel locker looked hollow. The air smelled like damp wool and burnt coffee. No one here knew how much I'd already sent home. That night, I wrote my resignation. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. I told myself it was for family. That maybe leaving would finally make them proud. Maybe, without the uniform, they'd see me. I packed in silence, every zipper sounding too loud. The next morning, I walked across the snow-dusted base one last time. The flag whipped in the icy wind. Somewhere behind me, a siren wailed. Ahead, only the open road back east. I traded my boots for civilian shoes. Moved into a small condo near Norfolk. Took a loan to start consulting, built it brick by brick. And every check I earned, I sent most back home. Each holiday, I told myself it was worth it. Each payment, I told myself I mattered. But as I drove tonight, past frozen fields and blinking red lights, I realized, maybe they never saw me at all. Norfolk felt quiet compared to the base. Seagulls screeched outside my condo windows. Salt air drifted through the thin glass panes. Most days, it felt like I was the only one awake. I started the company on a folding table. A second-hand laptop, stacks of yellow notepads. Nights stretched long, lit by a single desk lamp. The room smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. Defense calls came at odd hours. I learned to sound confident even when my voice cracked. Every deal felt like a battle, but I kept pushing. By the second year, contracts came steady. By the third, the numbers stopped feeling real. But I never told Mom. Or Dennis. To them, I was still the struggling ex-officer. They never asked where the mortgage money came from. Never asked how Dennis's debts vanished overnight. Each wire transfer left me drained. Not my accounts. Those grew fat. But my chest felt hollow every time I hit send. Holiday dinners were my only reward. And even there, I was invisible. One winter night, I stared at the dashboard. 8 figures blinked back at me. $82 million. I shut the screen and poured another cup of cold coffee. The walls echoed with nothing but the hum of the heater. I told myself it didn't matter. That one day, they'd notice. Maybe call me more than when they needed saving. But as the rain hit my condo windows tonight, the truth finally sank in. Maybe they never will. And maybe I'm done waiting for it. Rain tapped steady on my condo windows. The glow of the laptop screen lit my empty kitchen. Steam curled from my chipped coffee mug. Another late night, another report to finish. Then my email pinged. A flagged transaction. $40,000 withdrawn from the family trust. No signature from me. Just Dennis's initials in the note. My stomach tightened. I scrolled back through months of transfers. Mortgage payments, SUV loans, utility bills. Some had doubled without warning. Some led to accounts I didn't recognize. The radiator hissed. I reached for my leather folder. Inside, tucked between tax forms, sat a hand-written note. It wasn't mine. The ink was faded. The paper smelled like dust and pine. Elaine will cover it. She always does. She owes us for leaving. A mom's handwriting. My chest burned reading each line. I stood, pacing across the small condo. Rainwater dripped from the window frame onto the sill. The city outside was silent, only car tires hissing on wet pavement. I wanted to call her, ask her why. Ask her if this was what family meant. But my phone stayed on the counter. Screen dark. I couldn't bring myself to hear her voice yet. Instead, I stared at the trust dashboard again. Every number felt like a nail in a coffin. For years, I thought my silence kept peace. But now, it felt like it chained me. Every dollar sent, every quiet favor, just made me their invisible lifeline. And maybe, it was time to cut it. The cursor blinked on my screen, steady and taunting. Another email popped in. Subject line blank, sender masked. Inside, a single line. Transfer confirmed. Remaining balance of fourth 218. I traced the account number. It didn't match the family trust. Didn't match any vendor I used. But Dennis's name was on the attached file. Alongside mine. The smell of cold coffee filled the room. I pushed the mug aside, my hand shaking. Clicked open the PDF. Loan documents, overdue notices. Some marked, final warning. Each stamped with both our names, like I'd signed them myself. The rain outside turned heavier. Drops hit the window like fingers drumming. I scrolled faster, finding more emails, more attachments. Car loans, credit cards, even a second mortgage on Mom's farmhouse. All under my authorization, at least on paper. My jaw clenched. Dennis must have forged them. Or worse, convinced Mom I'd agreed. Every signature looked copied, traced, a little too perfect. The smell of printer ink from my desk made me nauseous. A faint hum came from the fridge. It was the only other sound in the condo. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. For years, I thought helping them was my duty. Now, it felt like they were burying me with it. The screen dimmed, pulling me back. Another ping. A new email, timestamped tonight. Subject: approval required. It was a request for another transfer. 10,000 this time, and Dennis's initials at the bottom, bold and unapologetic. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. Not to approve, but to save every file, every forged note, every trace of their betrayal, because maybe, soon, I'd need proof. The storm outside grew louder, wind howling against the windows. I pulled my storage box from the closet. Dust rose, sharp and musty, making me cough. Inside, stacks of folders and old family keepsakes. I opened the first envelope. Mom's handwriting again, looping and neat. Dennis will handle things. Elaine will keep paying. She owes us for leaving. Each word felt heavier than the last. Another envelope held photos. Christmas 2018, family by the tree. My chair was empty in every shot. One frame even had a torn edge. My face ripped clean away. I sat on the floor, the condo silent but for rain and the heater's hum. The paper smelled like damp wood and time. Each photo, each note, stacked beside my laptop. Proof they didn't just forget me. They erased me. The clock read past midnight. The glow from my desk lamp painted shadows along the wall. My knees ached as I reached for another folder. More bank statements, some I'd never seen before. Every one with forged initials, like I'd signed away my own future. I gathered everything into a single pile. Slid it into a locked briefcase under my desk. My hand stopped shaking once the latch clicked. No calls tonight. No angry confrontations. I wasn't ready to face them yet. Not until I knew every piece, every lie, every forged scrap. For now, I'd keep silent. But not broken. Every shred of paper would stay with me, waiting for the day they'd need to be seen. The farmhouse smelled of old soup and pine cleaner. Wind rattled the windows as I stepped into the kitchen. Dennis sat at the table, boots propped on a chair. Mom stirred a pot, back turned like I wasn't there. I set the folder down, papers spilling slightly. Forged loans, letters, photos. Everything I'd found. Mind explaining these? My voice felt cold. Dennis laughed, low and sharp. Always so dramatic, sis. You're lucky we let you help. Your mom turned slowly, ladle still in her hand. Lane, don't start this. Those papers aren't what they look like. Her voice wavered, but her eyes stayed hard. I felt my chest tighten, breath shallow. Dennis leaned closer, smirk wide. You left us for years. This is you making up for it. Stop acting like a victim. The floor creaked as he shifted, heavy boots scraping. My mind drifted back. Age 12, sitting on the back porch, rain soaking my sneakers. Dad had just passed. Mom cradled Dennis, whispering he was the strong one now. No one came for me. I'd sat alone until the lantern burned out. The pot on the stove hissed, steam clouding the room. Present pulled me back, but my chest still ached like that night. Same house, same cold silence, decades later. I tried to steady my voice. You forged my name, Dennis. You took my money, Mom. This isn't help, it's theft. Mom's ladle clattered into the sink. The sound echoed through the small kitchen. Dennis just smiled wider, arms crossed. The heater clicked off, leaving only the wind's hollow whistle. In that moment, I knew. They weren't scared of losing me. They were scared of losing control. The kitchen clock ticked, slow and loud. Its pendulum swung like a metronome, marking every tense breath. I spread the papers across the table. Ink, numbers, signatures, all proof they'd used me. Dennis slammed his palm down. The wooden table rattled, glasses clinking. You think you're the victim. You left this family. We survived without you. Now you're just paying your debt. His boots dragged as he stood, looming over me. The smell of damp wood from his coat filled the room. Mom moved closer, hand on his arm. Elaine, honey, he's just stressed. These loans, they're complicated. You don't understand how hard it's been here. My throat tightened. Heat crawled up my neck. You never asked how hard it's been for me. Not once. The words came out raw, almost shaking. Dennis chuckled, low and mocking. You had your fun playing soldier. Now grow up and take care of us. Like you should have from the start. His shadow stretched across the kitchen tiles, swallowing the light. The tick of the clock faded. I wasn't in the kitchen anymore. I was 16, walking the school hallway. Kids whispered as I passed, their eyes sharp. Daddy's gone. Dennis is the golden boy. Elaine's just weird. Lockers slammed like gunfire, and no one walked beside me. Not even at home. Mom was always busy praising Dennis's football trophies. The flashback stung, sharp as the winter air outside. Back in the kitchen, my hands trembled. The papers blurred in front of me. It felt like being 16 again. Unwanted, unheard, invisible. Dennis leaned closer, voice a whisper but heavy. You can leave now, sis. Or stay and keep quiet. Either way, you know you'll pay. The floor groaned under his weight as he stepped back, his grin cutting like a blade. The heater clicked off again, leaving the kitchen cold. Steam from the pot thinned into the air, smelling faintly of onions. I gathered the papers, sliding them into my folder. Dennis watched, smirk never fading. Mom finally spoke, her voice flat. Elaine, don't make this harder. We all do what we must. Family survives by leaning on each other. Her words echoed. hollow as the ticking clock. I looked around the kitchen. The peeling wallpaper. The crooked family photo with my face torn out. Every corner felt foreign now, like a stranger's house. Dennis leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You gonna cry again, sis? Or finally accept your place here? His boots squeaked as he shifted, blocking the doorway. The smell of his damp coat clung heavy in the air. My hand tightened on the folder. Every forged signature, every letter, every ripped photo. They were all I had left from this house. Proof that their family meant control, not love. Without a word, I stepped past Dennis. The floor groaned, each step louder in the silence. Mom didn't move. She just stared at the steaming pot, ladle in hand. Not once did she look at me. The cold night hit as soon as I opened the door. Wind stung my face, sharp and bitter. The farmhouse lights glowed behind me, soft and distant. I didn't look back again. The gravel crunched under my boots to the truck. Lantern light flickered by the porch, dim against the dark sky. Inside, I set the folder on the seat beside me. Started the engine. The hum of the heater felt like the only warmth left. Would you fight, or forgive? Comment 1 or 2. Norfolk's harbor wind howled through the cracked balcony door. Salt stung the air, mixing with the smell of cold coffee. I dropped my folder on the counter, pages spilling like loose leaves. The condo felt too quiet, even with the heater humming. My phone buzzed on the table. Victor's name lit the screen. I almost let it ring out. But his calls were never casual. I slid my thumb across the glass. Lane. His voice was low, calm, almost careful. We need to talk. Something's coming down from D.C. I stared at the papers on the counter. Forged notes, torn photos, Mom's sharp handwriting. My voice cracked. If this is another contract, Victor, I can't. Not tonight. It's not that, he said. There's a federal audit circling our sector. And a name came up. Yours. The silence stretched. Even the heater stopped humming, just the wind outside. Victor cleared his throat. Someone filed a complaint tied to your family trust. But it wasn't you. It came from Lancaster. My chest tightened. Dennis. Or your mother. We'll know soon. But, Elaine, Washington called me directly. They want you in person. My grip on the phone tightened. Why? Because. He paused, voice lowering. They want to meet the woman who's been keeping half the state's defense supply chain afloat. I froze, staring at the rain streaking the window. They know, Victor. They do now. And frankly, they don't care about the family mess. They care about you. The condo lights flickered as a gust slammed the balcony door. Victor's voice stayed steady. There's a car waiting at 6 tomorrow. DC wants answers. And maybe, they'll give you something back too. The line clicked dead, leaving just the wind and the faint creak of the building settling. I stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding louder than the storm outside. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like a door cracking open. The black sedan idled outside my condo at dawn. Its headlights cut through the misty Norfolk streets. I slid into the back seat, folder in hand. Victor sat beside me, silent but steady. The drive to D.C. felt unreal. Gray highways blurred past, wet from last night's storm. The engine hummed low, almost soothing. My fingers traced the folder's edge, knuckles pale. Victor finally spoke. They're not here to punish you, Elaine. They're here because they need you. We pulled up to a sandstone building near the mall. Tall flags whipped in the morning wind. The air smelled of rain and fresh paint. Inside, the halls echoed with polished footsteps. Marble floors reflected every flicker of fluorescent light. A woman in a dark suit greeted us. Ms. Porter, thank you for coming. I'm Director Keating. We've been following your company's contracts. Frankly, you're holding together more than you realize." Her tone was crisp, but not cold. I shifted in my chair, the leather creaking. "So why bring me here now?" Keating slid a folder across the polished table. Inside, a printed agenda. My name in bold under the header. Keynote acknowledgement. Keating's eyes met mine. "Tomorrow, the department will announce a new civilian advisory program. We need credibility, experience, and someone the public can trust. We want you as the face of it." The words hung heavy, echoing louder than the quiet room. Victor leaned forward, his voice calm. "It's recognition, Elaine. No more hiding in the shadows. No more letting them call you weak or a failure." I looked at the agenda again. A speech slot. An introduction by a cabinet secretary. Even the press roster, already printed. The paper smelled faintly of toner and wood polish. Keating stood, smoothing her jacket. "Your family may not see you, Miss Porter. But tomorrow the country will." Her words settled deep, heavier than the folder I still clutched. Outside, the wind cut sharp across the mall. The flags snapped, loud and certain. Victor held the car door for me. "Whatever you choose after this, Elaine, you won't be invisible anymore." As the sedan pulled away, DC's skyline blurred behind raindrops. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. And maybe tomorrow, I'd finally stand without shrinking. The rain hadn't stopped by the time I got home. Norfolk streets glistened under the dim streetlights. I set my folder on the table, fingers numb from the cold. The condo smelled like strong coffee and printer ink. Victor stood by the window, jacket still on. His reflection blurred in the glass. "We don't have much time," he said softly. "They'll push harder once they realize you're pulling away." I nodded, staring at the locked briefcase. Inside were weeks of evidence, forged signatures, hidden loans, every note Mom wrote behind my back, every photo where I'd been erased. The heater hummed, soft and steady. I pulled out my laptop, screen glowing in the dim room. Email after email, I tagged everything. Transfers. Invoices. Even the ones tied to fake vendors. Each click felt like pulling a splinter. Victor handed me a flash drive. "Encrypted. If something happens, this holds everything." His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. He knew this wasn't just business anymore. The clock on the wall ticked louder as the rain picked up. Wind whistled through the gap in the balcony door. Outside, the harbor waves slapped against the pier. It all sounded distant, like the world was moving without me. But my chest didn't ache the same way tonight. This wasn't grief anymore. It was fuel. Every page I saved, every file I encrypted. It felt like building a shield. Victor finally broke the silence. "You sure you don't want to call them? One last chance." I shook my head. "They didn't call me when they erased me. They don't get that chance now." The condo lights buzzed faintly, casting shadows along the walls. Rain pattered steady on the balcony glass. I scrolled through my contact list, each name feeling heavier than the last. Victor, Hannah, and 2 old officers who still owed me favors. The phone felt cold in my hand as I dialed. First, the lawyer. Her voice came clipped, precise. "We'll need affidavits, timestamps, and notarized copies. Don't send originals. Bring everything Monday." I nodded, even though she couldn't see. Next, a message to Hannah, kept it short. "Stay out of Dennis's way. I'll handle this. Trust me." The typing dots flashed, then vanished. No reply yet. The rain grew heavier, the sound almost drowning the heater's hum. I grabbed another file from the briefcase. The paper smelled faintly of dust and old ink. A memory hit as soon as I touched it. Flashback. Lancaster, years ago. Dad had just been buried. Mom sat at the dining table, pen in hand. Dennis leaned over my shoulder, voice low. "Sign it, Elaine. It's just paperwork. Keeps the house safe." The room had smelled of candle wax and damp wood. I'd signed without reading. Weeks later, half my savings vanished into that trust. Back in Norfolk, I set the file aside. My fingers curled into a fist. Not again. Not this time. Every document I'd touched now, I read twice. Every transfer, I double-checked. Victor stood by the kitchen counter, quiet. He poured 2 mugs of coffee, the steam curling upward. "Your circle's small, Elaine, but strong enough if we move right." I nodded, sipping the bitter brew. The taste was sharp, grounding me. The laptop pinged. A new email, subject line blank, just like before. Another request from Dennis. This time, I didn't even open it. Just dragged it into a folder labeled Evidence. The condo clock read past midnight. Only the desk lamp lit the room, casting long shadows. The heater clicked on, humming low against the sound of wind. I stacked the last of the files beside my laptop. Victor leaned over the counter, sipping his black coffee. The bitter scent mixed with the smell of warm dust from the heater. "We've got everything we need," he said quietly. "Every transfer, every forgery, every letter." I saved the final folder to the encrypted drive. The soft click of the mouse echoed like a gavel. "That lawyer will have it Monday," I said. "And if they try to bury me again, this goes straight to DC." Victor nodded, jaw tight. His reflection in the glass looked as worn as mine. "They won't expect you to fight this way. Not after how long you've stayed quiet." I wrapped my hands around my mug, the coffee now lukewarm. "I'm done keeping their lights on while they dim mine." Outside, a gust rattled the balcony door. The harbor waves slapped the pier, steady and relentless. Victor checked his watch, then looked at me. "We have a week until the announcement. Use it. Get your words ready. And be ready to watch them fall apart." I shut the laptop, the screen fading to black. The condo went quiet except for the hum of the heater. Even in the silence, my chest felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was building something that could end this. The drive sat on the counter, glowing faintly under the lamp. Every file, every shred of proof, locked inside. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling the weight settle in. Not fear, not grief, just resolve. The law office smelled like new paper and polished oak. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, faint but steady. I sat across from Marla, my lawyer, a stack of files between us. Her pen scratched quickly over a form, each stroke sharp. "We'll file these motions Friday," she said, voice clipped. "No one can touch your accounts after that. Not Dennis. Not your mother." Her words cut clean, like a blade through silk. I nodded, fingers tracing the folder's edge. Each document inside was another nail in their coffin. Transfers with forged signatures. Emails with timestamps. Letters in Mom's delicate, unforgiving script. Victor paced near the window, his shoes clicking softly on the wood. "The timing lines up," he murmured. "By the time DC puts you on that stage, Lancaster will know the truth." His reflection in the glass looked calm, but his jaw was set tight. Marla slid another page across the desk. "Your statement for the hearing. Simple. Firm. We don't need drama. Just facts." The page smelled faintly of ink and new stock. I took the pen, feeling the weight of it. Each signature felt heavier than steel. The clock in the office ticked louder as the day stretched on. Outside, traffic hummed faintly, muffled by thick windows. I closed the folder with a soft thud. "Once this is filed," I said, "they'll realize the money's gone. All of it." Victor met my eyes, his voice low. "They won't just be angry. They'll panic." Marla leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. Good. Panic makes people sloppy. Sloppy makes them easy to finish. I rose from the chair, the leather creaking beneath me. The room felt warmer now, heavy with the scent of paper and coffee. I slipped the folder into my briefcase, snapping the latch. Quietly. Deliberately. Step one of the plan was done. The condo lights were dim, only the desk lamp glowing. A stack of note cards sat on the table, edges worn from my hands. Victor stood by the balcony door, the harbor wind rattling the glass. Outside, the waves hit steady against the pier. I read the first line aloud. My name is Elaine Porter. For 15 years, I served this country quietly. My voice wavered on, quietly. Victor raised a brow. Again. But breathe this time. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders back. The coffee on the table had gone cold, smelling bitter. I sipped it anyway, the sharp taste cutting through my nerves. The heater hummed, a soft rhythm behind every word. We tried again. This time, my voice held. Stronger. Lower. My name is Elaine Porter. I built what kept their lights on while they erased me. Victor nodded slowly, tapping his pen on the table. Better. Keep the pause there. Let them feel that line. I flipped another card. The words felt heavy but right. Not vengeance. Not desperation. Just truth, steady and unshaken. Each syllable echoed in the small room, bouncing off the walls. The harbor wind howled louder outside. The blinds swayed softly, casting shifting shadows. Victor looked at me, his tone even. They'll try to spin it, Elaine. Make you the villain. But this. He tapped the cards. This keeps it clean. Just the facts. Just your voice. I stared at the stack, thumb tracing the top edge. In 24 hours I'd be on that stage. Not as their silent benefactor. Not as the forgotten daughter. But as myself, and maybe, for the first time, that would be enough. The suitcase sat open on my bed, half filled. Briefcase on one side, speech cards on the other. Rain streaked the condo windows, distorting the city lights below. The heater clicked on, soft and low. I laid the flash drive on top of the papers, every file, every forged signature, tucked inside that tiny shell. Victor stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Security detail will meet you at the venue. You sure you're ready? I zipped the suitcase, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Ready or not, this goes forward. The coffee pot hissed in the kitchen, its bitter scent drifting in. My stomach turned, not from nerves, from knowing what tomorrow could bring. Victor stepped closer, voice lower now. If you put this all out there, Elaine, you won't just hurt them. You'll end them. You okay carrying that? I stared at the briefcase, the latch still open. The lamplight glinted off the metal edges. After what they took from me. Yeah, Victor. I'm okay carrying that. The heater clicked off, leaving just the wind at the balcony door. I slipped the speech cards into my coat pocket. The words felt heavier now than when I wrote them. Not because they were sharp, but because they were true. And truth cuts deeper than anger ever could. Victor grabbed his jacket, heading for the door. I'll meet you at dawn. Get some sleep, if you can. The door shut behind him, the sound echoing through the empty condo. I stood there alone, hand resting on the briefcase. The harbor waves crashed beyond the glass, relentless. Tomorrow, the stage lights would burn bright. The microphones would carry my name farther than I'd ever wanted. The marble steps of the courthouse gleamed under the cold morning sun. Each footstep echoed, sharp and steady. Victor walked beside me, coat collar turned up against the wind. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras already clicking. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and fresh paint. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting everything in a cold glow. The long hallway stretched ahead, lined with flags and heavy oak doors. Every sound felt louder here, shoes, whispers, even the click of my briefcase latch. Marla met us at the security checkpoint. "Dennis and your mother are here," she murmured, voice tight. "They're trying to file counterclaims before the hearing." My jaw tightened. "They won't have the chance," Victor said flatly. We moved through the hallway, the sound of murmurs trailing behind. One reporter's question cut through the noise. "Ms. Porter, is it true you funded your family for years?" I kept walking, heels clicking, not giving him the headline. The courtroom was cold, the wood benches gleaming under the bright lights. Dennis sat at the table across from ours, jaw set, suit slightly wrinkled. Mom sat beside him, her hands folded, eyes darting nervously. She didn't look at me. Not once. The judge entered, robe brushing the floor. Everyone rose, the scrape of chairs filling the chamber. The gavel hit once, echoing like a shot. The room fell silent. Marla slid a folder toward the clerk. "Evidence, Your Honor." All notarized. The clerk's hands brushed the papers, the faint scent of toner rising. Dennis leaned to whisper to Mom, his expression twisting with frustration. The judge glanced at our table. "Ms. Porter, you'll have your chance to speak after review. For now, sit tight." My fingers tightened around my pen, knuckles pale. Victor placed a steady hand on my shoulder, silent but grounding. The murmurs from the benches grew again, soft but insistent. Everyone here wanted the same thing. A story. But not my truth. Not yet. That would come when the microphones turned on. The courtroom doors opened to the press conference hall. Flashes hit instantly, blinding for a second. Victor guided me forward, his hand steady at my elbow. The podium stood under harsh white lights, microphones clustered like thorns. Marla whispered close. "Keep it calm. No anger. Just the facts." I nodded, slipping my note cards from my coat pocket. The paper felt warm, almost slick from my grip. The first flash nearly drowned my breath. I leaned into the microphone. "My name is Elaine Porter. For 15 years, I served my country quietly. I built what kept others afloat, while my own family erased me." A wave of whispers rolled across the room. Cameras clicked, the sound like steady rain. I laid out each point, one by one. Transfers. Forged loans. Letters in my mother's hand. All displayed on the screen behind me. Reporters scribbled furiously, flashes strobing with every new document. The judge cleared his throat, trying to quiet the tension. But the room buzzed like a live wire. Dennis shot up from his seat, voice booming. "She's lying! Those files are fake! She abandoned us." His face flushed red, veins straining at his neck. Mom gripped his arm, whispering frantically. Her knuckles whitened around his sleeve. I didn't flinch. Instead, I tapped the next slide. Audio recordings. Dennis's voice, clear as day, ordering transfers in my name. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of a gavel pounding the bench. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Order! This hearing will maintain order." His gavel hit twice more, wood cracking against wood. The noise died, leaving only the faint hum of cameras. I gripped the sides of the podium. My silence kept their world standing. Now, the truth stands on its own. The lights felt hotter now, burning against my skin. But I didn't step back. Not this time. The gavel hit once, echoing like a shot. The judge's voice cut through the tension. "These records are admissible. Further investigation will proceed immediately." Gasps rippled across the benches. Reporters whispered, pens scratching, cameras firing in rapid bursts. Dennis slumped back into his chair, jaw tight, eyes wild. Mom clutched her purse, face pale, lips pressed tight. The judge glanced toward their table. "Until this review concludes, all access to the trust is frozen. All pending withdrawals blocked." Dennis muttered something under his breath, fists clenched. Mom reached for his arm, her fingers trembling. Victor leaned closer, his voice low. "It's over for them, Elaine. For now. At least." I exhaled, slow and steady, the weight in my chest easing. But my grip on the podium didn't loosen yet. The court officer signaled the press to clear the aisle. Flashes still popped, cameras trailing every step I took. Victor walked beside me, briefcase in hand, his posture firm. The air outside felt colder, sharper than before. We stepped down the courthouse steps together. Reporters shouted questions from behind the barricades. "Ms. Porter, are you cutting your family off for good? Will you testify before the committee next week?" I kept moving, my heels steady on the stone. No answers. Not today. At the curb, the black sedan waited, engine humming. Victor opened the door, the leather seats gleaming under the streetlights. He looked back once toward the courthouse. "Crowd's already turning," he murmured. "They'll want your side on every headline by morning." I slid into the car, the door closing with a soft thud. The chaos outside faded behind the tinted glass. Only the hum of the engine and the faint sound of sirens remained. Victor settled beside me, briefcase resting on his lap. Through the window, the courthouse lights glowed against the dark sky. Inside those walls, their world was cracking apart. Mine, for the first time, felt steady. The car eased forward into the night. And for a brief moment, the silence felt like peace. The new office smelled of fresh paint and polished wood. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, spilling across the mahogany desk. The sign on the wall read, "Porter Foundation Scholarships for Women Veterans." For the first time in years, the name felt like mine. Victor stood by the window, jacket draped over his chair. Stacks of grant applications lined the table beside him. Outside, the city hummed faintly. Distant traffic, occasional horns. The harbor breeze still carried a hint of salt, even this far inland. I signed the first set of documents, the pen gliding smoothly. Each signature felt lighter than the ones I'd scrawled for my family. No deception here. No one taking without asking. Just purpose. And peace. A photo sat on the desk corner. Not of Lancaster. Not of anyone I left behind. It showed a group of women in uniform, laughing by a hangar. Faces from my service days. Friends who'd understood what giving cost. People who had never erased me. Victor placed another file in front of me. "Emergency grants," he said softly. "For vets with kids, stuck between housing and school. The first checks go out Friday." His tone held no urgency this time. Just quiet pride. I glanced at the calendar. 1 month since the courthouse. 2 weeks since DC announced my role as a civilian advisor. Every headline still burned, but none of them cut like the ones Dennis had thrown for years. Now, I didn't flinch when I saw my name. The waves slapped softly against the pier below. Through the open window, gulls cried, drifting on the wind. For the first time, the sound didn't feel lonely. It felt like home. I leaned back in the chair, letting the sunlight warm my face. The smell of fresh coffee drifted in from the small kitchen. Victor poured 2 mugs, setting one by my hand. "No calls from Lancaster this week," he said, a faint smile tugging his mouth. I shook my head, returning the smile, and for once, the silence between us felt right. This chapter wasn't about cutting ties anymore. It was about building something lasting, something they could never touch. And as I signed the last page, I realized I no longer needed them to see me. I could see myself now. The hall smelled of fresh flowers and brewed coffee. Soft lights glowed from chandeliers above, warm against the polished wood floor. Rows of folding chairs faced a small stage draped in navy fabric. A banner hung overhead. Porter Foundation, First Annual Scholarship Ceremony. Victor stood near the podium, organizing envelopes. Each one carried a name, a start for someone like me years ago. Women filled the front rows. Veterans, single mothers, some with toddlers on their laps. Their voices hummed softly, a mix of nerves and quiet hope. I stepped to the podium, note cards in hand but unread. The microphone buzzed softly as I adjusted it. Every face turned, waiting. I took a slow breath, letting the air settle in my chest. "My name is Elaine Porter," I began, voice steady. "For years, I thought being erased meant I had no worth. But standing here, I know healing isn't about their approval. It's about building what they can't take away." Peen applause rose, soft but growing, echoing off the walls. I glanced at the first row. A young woman cradling a baby, another gripping her acceptance letter like a lifeline. Their eyes glistened, not with pity, but with understanding. "These scholarships," I continued, "here not handouts. They are a reminder that resilience is power. That we can rise, even when the people closest to us turn away." My voice caught slightly, but it didn't shake. Victor passed me the first envelope. The paper was thick, edges crisp, smelling faintly of ink. I called the first name. A woman in her 40s stepped forward, tears in her eyes. The applause swelled, wrapping the room in warmth. By the last envelope, the hall felt lighter, brighter. The air smelled of lilies and fresh coffee, the sound of soft laughter filling the corners. For the first time, I felt no weight pressing on my chest, only space to breathe. I returned to the microphone, hands resting on its cool metal edge. If you've ever been betrayed, erased, or left behind, know this: your story isn't over. Your strength is still yours, and your healing can begin right where you stand. Applause rose again, long and steady, mingling with the faint cry of a baby and the hum of soft music starting. I let it wash over me, not as validation, but as proof I was exactly where I needed to be. If you've faced betrayal, or built yourself back after being erased, share your story below. You're not alone. Elaine's story isn't just about cutting ties or freezing accounts. It's about realizing her value never depended on those who erased her. Her quiet revenge wasn't vengeance. It was a doorway to peace. She learned that healing doesn't mean returning to the same table. It means building your own, inviting only those who respect your seat. Legacy, she realized, isn't tied to bloodlines or old houses. It's in the lives she lifts, the voices she helps rise, and the peace she claims without asking permission. Justice can be quiet, but it's powerful. Healing comes when we stop shrinking for others, and true legacy isn't what we inherit. It's what we choose to create, for ourselves and for those who need it most.